Right, good evening everyone, members of the committee, those sitting in the audience and anybody watching on the Council's YouTube channel. Very nice to see you all here this evening for the meeting of Local Plan Subcommittee, 24th of July. I will start with apologies for absence. I have one, which is from Councillor Finkin, who is substituted this evening by Councillor Diamond, and welcome to him. And move on to declarations of interest, please, to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct, and taken appropriate advice where necessary. Right, anybody? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, quite a few, because Silver End and Rivenhall are up tonight. So I know two of the speakers, as they're both fellow members of the Parish Council, Councillor McRae and Wright, and also obviously know Councillor Wright as his fellow ward member. Both Councillor Wright and myself have studiously avoided any discussion of sites at Rivenhall Parish Council, and when they have, we've been stood outside in the car park just to be absolutely sure we can't even hear it. Ditto at Silver End where I've attended there. The only contact I've had is where I've been asked questions about process and dates for meetings.
Yes.
But I haven't discussed sites.
It's fine, thank you. Councillor Wright in the audience.
Thank you, Chair. I'll declare a pecuniary interest on site 2420, which is adjacent to my house, and the proposed border. I'm actually inside the development border of that site.
Thank you.
I'll leave the room when that item comes up.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I'll explain in a minute, members, how we're going to manage that particular item. Anyone else for any declarations of interest? No? Okay, good. Minutes of previous meetings. We have the minutes for both the 19th of June and the 25th of June, which have been circulated. Has anybody got any comments? Councillor Bowes-Flint? Oh, you just removed, right, okay, fine. Well, if nobody has any amendments to make, that's removed. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ritchie, is that acceptable to everybody? Just a quick nod, thank you very much. Right, just bear with me while I sign those. Thank you, Alison. Right, okay. Public question time. Just a reminder, the way we're going to do this is as we have with previous meetings. I will ask speakers to come forward before the agenda items that they are interested in, rather than taking them all now. Also, with regards to Rivenhall End and Councillor Wright's interest, what I'm going to do, we'll take Gosfield first. We then have two speakers on agenda item 6, Rivenhall and Rivenhall End. One of those speakers in particular refers to the boundaries and 2420. So at that point, before that speaker starts, Councillor Wright is going to leave the room, and we will take item 9, which is site 2420 first, have any debate on that, take a vote on that, and then we will go and retrieve Councillor Wright and he can come back into the room and we can carry on. Right, that just seems like a sensible way to do that. And then we'll move on to Silver End. Just a reminder, please, to everybody to speak up if you can. We've had some comments and feedback from members of the committee, people in the audience and so on, that they have struggled sometimes to hear what everybody's saying during the debate. So if officers and members of the committee can just make sure you speak up a bit, I think that would be helpful. And just finally, as with previous meetings, where sites are not recommended for allocations, we won't have long presentations. We will have the map up on the screen. The officer, I think, will give a very brief summary of why they're not being allocated, just the reasons for that, but we won't have long presentations on those, unless, of course, if I see a hand go up around the committee and somebody wants to make a comment, then that's absolutely fine. And we will have presentations on the sites that are being recommended for allocation. Right, good. So in that case, we will now move on to agenda item 5, which is Regulation 18 draft allocations for Gosfield. We have no speakers on this, so we can move on to the presentation, which is with Julie. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. The first two sites for Gosfield are Gosfield's 2155A and 2155B. The beaches, the streets, which overlap but have different boundaries. Since the agenda was published, Gosfield 2155A has been withdrawn and will not now be considered. This was the larger of the two sites and had proposed specialist housing and a care home. The remaining site, Gosfield 2155B, is the smaller site, and this slide shows the relationship with site A, and site A is shown in red. Site B is proposed for housing, as is set out in the agenda paragraph 3.16, and this site has not been recommended for allocations for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.19. The next site relates to Gosfield 2156, Gosfield Business Park. This 2.89 hectare site has been put forward for employment use and is an area of scrubland adjacent to the existing employment area. Gosfield Airfield is designated in the adopted local plan under policy LPP3 as an employment policy area. This policy area permits a range of uses such as B1, B2, B8, vehicle repairs and waste management facilities. The site itself is largely free of constraints, although a sizable part lies within the outer zone of a major gas pipeline. Nevertheless, subject to consultation with the National Grid operator, it should be acceptable to allocate the site. The site also lies south of an area of tree preservation order and community woodlands, but is separated from this area by the former runway. The Employment Land Review has recommended further allocation of land for employment use and at Gosfield Airfield, and it is proposed that this site be allocated. And the detailed design should include further landscaping. Gosfield 2157, land south of Church Road. This has been proposed for housing, including market affordable retirement and self-build, but has not been put forward for allocations for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.44.
Okay.
Gosfield 2158, land at Aylwards Farm, has been proposed for between 3,000 and 5,000 houses. This scale of development is strategic in scale and will be considered at a future meeting.
Thanks, Julie.
Gosfield 2159, land west of Braintree Road, has been proposed for housing but has not been put forward for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.56 in the report.
Okay.
The next site again is at Gosfield Airfield. Land adjacent to the old airfield has been proposed for employment purposes, but has not been put forward for allocation for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.66 in the reports. And Gosfield, again, Gosfield 2161 at Gosfield Airfield has been put forward for community use. However, this use is not put forward for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.82 in the reports. Gosfield 2162, land west of the street, has been proposed for custom-built properties for the over 55s, but without care elements and including affordable housing. This site has not been put forward for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraphs 3.93. The next site is Gosfield 2163, land rear of 13 to 14 Park Cottages. Has been proposed for housing, but is not proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.105 of the report. Gosfield 2164, land lying east of the street, has been proposed for housing, but again has not been proposed for allocation for the reasons set out in paragraph 3.114 of the report. Gosfield 2415, east of Headingham Road, has been proposed for housing and affordable housing, but has not been put forward for allocation for the reasons set out from paragraph 3.123 in the report. The final site for Gosfields is, again, it has not been put forward through the call for site. This is a site that the Employment Land Review has recommended that more land be allocated at Gosfield Airfield in general, and it had suggested 21 hectares. However, a more limited area has been proposed for allocation, as although the site has relatively few constraints, as mentioned in the report, there are other policy constraints in the other sites that we have looked at in the report. And these include tree preservation, areas of tree preservation orders and community woodland to the north and west. And there are possible heritage issues to the south, which concern the Gosfield Registered Park and Gardens and various listed buildings. Given that sufficient employment land can be found elsewhere, this area was suggested in the ELR and was thought to be sufficient. And that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Julie. Members, anybody have any comments they wish to make? Councillor Cunningham.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Just regarding Gosfield employment land, I'm afraid I'm going to take one of these meanders down memory lane to audible groans, I'm sure. But I do remember when we were going through this process in 2016, we had a number of we had one quite deep conversation about allocation of employment land at Gosfield. And I think there was an appetite amongst some of us, I remember, to actually to fully allocate the land that was at Gosfield Airfield in the emerging local plan, and the full extent of the land that had come through in the call for sites. And I remember there was quite a strong opinion, former Councillor Lady Newton being particularly strong, and I can still remember the steely look, that suggested that we shouldn't. And of course there was a sound policy decision there that if we over allocate employment land, that could be interpreted by an inspector as therefore requiring more houses. Now, I just want to clarify here, was the land that was allocated in the last round, the last local plan process, has that been fully built out, or is this land that's been reallocated here? And in terms of total acreage or hectareage, how much are we actually saying let's allocate, and how much are we suggesting that we shouldn't allocate? And the reason why is, if we think that employment land can be covered off elsewhere across the district, that's fine, that's a logical argument. But we also have to be realistic that this is a site that has developed well, is popular. We remember a similar employment site that's developed with great strength over the last 30 or so years at Earls Cone on a former airfield site. And I'm just wondering, are there reasons why other sites that perhaps aren't as well as established would still be better than perhaps reaching the potential where there obviously seems to be market interest in the Gosfield Airfield?
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. I'm going to look to officers to respond to that, please. Gary?
It sounds more like a employment land issue, so I'll try to address some of the points. In terms of hectareage, GOS 2156 is the land that we want to allocate. It's the new land, and that's 2.6 hectares. ELR 2 is already in use for storage, so that's an adjustment, and that is about 1 hectare or so. In total, the whole site, if you were to allocate the rest of the airfield, that would add an additional 21 hectares, although the landowner has proposed some mixed uses, some community-led development, and I think some education. So that is not all going to be proposed as employment land, even if it were to come forward. And in terms of, I think now there were concerns about it, increasing our residential need if we allocate more employment. That is now divorced. Those two are separate calculations because we follow the standard methodology. And the standard methodology is purely a population-based calculation. So we can increase employment and it doesn't have a reciprocal effect on residential anymore.
So, apologies, no, thank you very much indeed for that, Gary. That's extremely helpful. This is additionality. These are additional sites on top of what was agreed in the recent local plan that was adopted 2022, where we looked at the call for sites in 2016. So this is additional on top of already allocated.
Yeah, apologies, I have not really talked about its occupancy.
Right.
So it's a low density employment in the ELR. It's identified as the larger part of the site is used by a transporter business, and they already informally use a lot of land to the west. Some of it is in blue, some of it is within the green area. A lot of it is open storage, and there's a few buildings on site to the west, and to the south is a collection of smaller units, and they, as far as what I could tell when I visited, they were fully occupied, and the Employment Land Review also recommends that this would be an ideal location for low density employment.
I think one thing we take comfort from is that Gary has said, so the allocation of employment land, it will be treated separately from the requirement for housing as far as an inspector is concerned, so we don't need to be too concerned about that at this stage. Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Abbott.
Observation and then a question, if I may, Madam Chairman. Observation is that so far, north of Braintree, we've allocated almost no housing at all, really. I know Gosfield is not a key service village. I think, is it tier 3?
Yes.
But we've rejected all the housing sites, even though the parish council supports some of them, or doesn't object to others. Now, later tonight, we're going to be talking about the SHMAR, and I'm going to ask a separate question about that. And that's talking about the need for us to identify 19,000 houses between 2024 and 2041. And I know that doesn't directly relate to the numbers we've got to put in the local plan review, and there's going to be questions around that. But I'm just concerned that we seem to be loading an awful lot of housing into the discussions in September, and that actually it's not a sustainable way forward. I've always thought that the villages need some housing, even if there's small to moderate sites to keep the villages going, and some of those sites in Gosfield were specialist housing as well, which the SMART specifically identifies we need. So a consistent approach, and we'll talk about this later this evening, to the villages is needed. And then my question is, what is GOS 249? Is that a site that's already in the plan?
Yes, so that site is already allocated. It's where the transporter business is running, mainly to the west. I think it actually also includes the small units to the south as well. So there's a main road that runs east to west through the middle of the site, if you can identify that. And then to the south of the main road is the smaller units, and then to the north is the transporter business.
Councillor Walsh, did you have your hand
I
up?
had trouble hearing Gary.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. Comments duly noted. I don't disagree that the villages need some housing. I think we will all agree that villages need some housing to maintain the services that they had. I think whichever way round we've done this, whether we'd done the large sites first and then the villages, or a mix, it would still have been difficult to decide where we're allocating. So, all right. Bearing all that in mind, I think we can hopefully move recommendations, which are on pages 7 and 8. That cites 1A down to 12 as per officer's recommendation. Could I have somebody to move that, please?
First site's been withdrawn.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I need. Yes, beg your pardon. I need to mention that site 1A 21558 has been withdrawn. So ignore that. Yes, Councillor Ritchie, moving.
Yeah, move that.
Thank you. And seconder, please, Councillor Monday. Can I have a show of hands, please? Right. For any against? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. Thank you, members. Right. So move on to agenda item 6, which are the sites we're looking at for Rivenhall and Rivenhall End. I'll just wait for Councillor Wright to leave the chamber. We have 2 speakers on this. The first one is Mr. Darren Hills, resident of Rivenhall. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Hills. Thank you. And if you put your microphone on. Great. Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'd like to raise concerns about the proposed extension of the Witham development boundary, as shown on the draft plan map called Witham North. This extension includes 4 sites within the parish of Rivenhall, amounting to 368 houses. Houses that are physically in Rivenhall, but would now fall under Witham's development boundary. This includes 20 homes that have been part of Rivenhall for more than 70 years. To put this in context, the rest of Rivenhall currently has 306 homes, with approximately 280 of those located within 2 clearly defined development boundaries. So I ask, why is it necessary to absorb these 368 homes into the Witham boundary? Why not establish a 3rd distinct boundary for them under Rivenhall? It raises a troubling question. Are these boundary changes a step towards transferring these homes and possibly the land into Witham Parish itself? If that is the case, I must express a strong opposition on behalf of myself and many other long-standing residents of the 20 homes that have been part of Rivenhall for decades. I'd also like to point out that phases 1 and 2 of Rivenhall Park, over 300 homes, were built within Rivenhall and later reassigned to the Witham Parish. Finally, I urge you to reject the development proposal of Rivenhall 2420. This site serves as the last green buffer separating Rivenhall from Witham. Its loss would erase the physical distinction between the 2 communities and contribute further to congestion already being seen at pinch points like at the railway bridge at Oak Road, and further pressure on overstretched health services in the area. For reference, the sites that you wish to move to Witham development boundary are Rivenhall Park Phase 3, which is 58 houses, Rivenhall Park Phase 4, 230 houses. The proposal of 2420, which is another 60 houses, and the existing 20, a total of 368. I do have written proof from the majority of existing residents who are against 2420, and they're adamant they want to stay within the parish of Rivenhall. Please hear us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Hills. Next speaker is Councillor John McRae from Rivenhall Parish Council. Good evening, Mr McRae. Councillor McRae.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
This is a statement on behalf of Rivenhall Parish Council. The number of houses in Rivenhall has doubled over the past few years, including buildings on the green buffer zone between Rivenhall and Witham. Then the boundary was moved, so these properties, as just mentioned before, are classed as being in Witham, and currently further planning permission has been granted and construction underway, which again will double our number of dwellings in the village. Rivenhall does not have the infrastructure to support any further increase in its population. At our May Parish Council Assembly, the leader of Braintree District Council, Mr Butland, stated to all the public there that Rivenhall had recently seen more than its fair share of housing. Our school is at capacity and causes traffic issues at certain times of the day. We do not have a doctor's surgery or dental facilities. Our nearest hospitals, Broomfield and Chelmsford. We have one small village shop and no public house. The bus service through the village is unreliable and buses do not turn up for various reasons. There is no bus service at all in Rivenhall End for at least a third of our residents. We suffer from traffic issues due to two pinch points for traffic, which is trying to access the A12. One is the congestion at Witham Railway Station by the bridge, which then leads to local traffic from Silver End and from Cressing using Rivenhall as a rat run and trying to exit at Oak Road, Rivenhall, onto the A12. There's another further pinch point, which is the railway bridge in Oak Road, which is single one-way traffic. There's also height and weight restriction, which HGVs and overheight vehicles ignore, sometimes hitting the bridge, which then leads to delays on the main line to London. So what we're saying here is the roads throughout the village are in a very poor condition, due mainly to construction traffic for housing development in Rivenhall, Silver End and Cressing. The edges of the roads are all breaking away as they're too narrow for HGVs to pass. Developers very often refer to the fact that Witham Rail Station is a short distance from Rivenhall, but fail to mention that the trains are overcrowded at rush hour and there are no current plans for any upgrades. New developments must never be allowed to lead to the destruction and disappearance of small rural communities, such as Rivenhall. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor McRae. Right, members, we're going to move to recommendation 9 to start with, which is RIV 2420, land north of Rickstones Road. We'll deal with that one first and then we can bring Councillor Wright back in. Gary, I think you're taking these, aren't you?
Thanks. Just for context, I'm just going to go through the settlement overview for Rivenhall and Rivenhall End briefly. Rivenhall and Rivenhall End are both third-tier villages, and local plan is proposed to retain that designation in the local plan review. As a third-tier village, the local plan states that there's a lack of facilities and services capable of filling day-to-day needs. However, Rivenhall does have a village shop, church, village hall. Meanwhile, Rivenhall End has a village hall, petrol station, convenience store, coffee shop and employment areas. Bus route 38 runs to Rivenhall and is every 30 minutes at peak times and hourly at off-peak times. And Rivenhall End is on the 71 bus corridor. However, the bus stops are currently disused. Rivenhall has access to primary school and secondary schools are within 1 kilometre at Witham. Additionally, a selection of services and facilities at Witham are within 3 kilometres. The closest rail station is Witham, and Rivenhall End benefits from the A12 sustainable travel corridor. However, the It's currently a cycleway and a footpath, however it's severely affected by noise and air pollution from the A12. Direct access to the A12 is available at Oak Road, however these are substandard short on-off slips which are challenging for heavy vehicles and a safety issues for the users. The most significant applications within the parish boundaries were adjacent to Whittam, land south of Wickstones Road for 58 dwellings, and phase 4 of the northeast of Rectory Lane at 226 dwellings. So talking about RIV 2420, so land north of Wickstones Road, this is 2.4 hectares and capable of accommodating 50 to 60 dwellings. This site is adjacent to John Ray Walk, to the east of Chatterton Free School and New Wickstones Academy, that is visible on the map. It's near services available in this part of Whittam and is functionally part of Whittam, although it does lie within Rivenhall Parish. It's a greenfield site with strong tree boundaries, including the canopied passage of John Ray Walk, which is proposed to be retained. Concerns about John Ray Walk being a wildlife corridor will be dealt with at planning application stage, but it could have a downward effect on the capacity of this site, hence the 50 to 60. The parcel is identified as medium-low landscape capacity. There are limited observable impacts on longer landscape views owing to the trees surrounding the site. A local wildlife site in ancient woodland, Tearcroft Wood, is around 250 metres to the north, but there are no on-site heritage or ecological constraints identified on the map. Access would be from Wickstones Road, and there's a verge and hedge currently owned by the Highways Authority. This would not be an impediment to development, however the creation of a suitable access could result in a minor loss of the hedge. The main benefits of the site are its sustainable location. It's within walking distance to schools, shops. There's a bus service, number 38. The rail station is around 1 kilometre away. There's minor harm identified to public right-of-way users and the character of the area. It's outside the development boundary but not in the green buffer. And there's potential to provide a paved alternative route for John Way Walk, so it's usable in all weathers. There could be enhanced parking and better access to the countryside. And should development be proposed north of Chatterton School, it will also be necessary to link it into any potential development there. So the recommendation is recommendation 9, and it's for land north of Wickstones Road to be allocated for residential development. Thank you.
Councillor Abbott and then Councillor Walsh. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I welcome the deferment of Rivenhall from the meeting in June, and thank you for agreeing to that, as the agenda contained a number of areas of fact and omissions, and it's good to see, and I acknowledge that most of those, as far as Rivenhall End and Rivenhall, have now been addressed, including taking into account the fact that, which wasn't known, I believe, at the time the report was written, that the A12 scheme's now been cancelled, which is a major issue for development in this area. But not all of the items have been addressed. So we now know that for years to come, we're still going to have the safety issues and poor quality environment along the A12, substandard slip roads, although we hope, as mentioned at full council on Monday, that the National Highways will look to do some local work on the slip roads at Rivenhall End. But the point there is that any more development in this area is going to have to use everything that's there now, which is congested, substandard and unsafe. Rivenhall is a Tier 3 village. The agenda report details that, and as per Silver End later tonight, and as per Cressing at an earlier local planning committee meeting, substantial levels of development have taken place, and the Speaker has gone through those, totalling nearly 300 houses at Bellways 3 and 4, which remain within Rivenhall Parish, and phases 1 and 2, which are now within Whittam. So with this site recommended for allocation, if this goes ahead, the total number of houses in Rivenhall would be built in just a small number of years, would be well over 300. The current number of houses in the parish is, I'm not sure the exact number, but I think it's about 330. so doubling the parish in size. Now, this additional site would be as much as 500 metres from the edge of the built-up area of Witham, which you can barely see on the edge of that map, where it says Blanchfort Gardens. That's actually that's actually Rivenhall 3, Bellway 3 within Rivenhall. Now, that is equivalent to losing more than half the rural gap between Braintree and Rain. So you can see how we see this locally as a major incursion into the parish. And of course, this council has fought strenuously not to allow the gap between Braintree and Rain to be closed. I think when I said not all of the issues were addressed, the comment that the officer has said, which was in the June agenda, is that this site is visually and functionally part of Witham. I would invite any member of this authority to go and have a look at that site and tell me whether they think that's part of the urban setup of Witham or whether it's in the quite deep into the rural parish of Rivenhall. It's clearly the latter. The top north-eastern corner would be only 250 metres from Tearcroft Wood, which is deep into the countryside. And we are already suffering litter and vandalism in that wood, unfortunately, which we're having to deal with. What the officer hasn't mentioned, but we nicely shown on that map, is dead opposite where the access would be, is Rectory Lane. That is a protected lane, it's a quiet lane, and it's also part of the John Ray Walk. So this housing access would come out directly opposite a lane that we're supposed to be protecting through the local plan. And we'd need more hedges and trees lost to provide that access. The officer says that the answer to John Ray Walk being a bit muddy in the winter is to provide a lit, paved, parallel route. But that would completely alter the character of the John Ray Walk, which is a sunken lane, an ancient lane, a canopied lane, where currently where you go along it, you have these lovely views through the gaps of the trees into the open countryside. Having a street-lit path running alongside that would be completely alien to its context. The officer did mention public rights-of-way. What that map doesn't show is that the very southern tip of the site is where public rights-of-way Rivenhall 1 and 7 meet. 7 goes off up John Ray Walk, 1 goes down southward. So that's an additional impact. It would be a direct physical impact on those public rights-of-way. In terms of services, yes, I agree. In theory, the secondary schools are walkable, that is true. But the site would be remote, I would say, from the railway station and Witham Town Centre. In fact, if you look at the overall allocations maps for Witham and Rivenhall, this site is by far the most remote from, in terms of expansion of Witham, from the town centre and the railway station. I think most people are going to drive. They're not going to walk. Actually, if Rivenhall is going to get some more housing, I think we should be looking at site 2249, which I think could be a genuine village site. It's a small addition that doesn't affect the green buffer. It's very walkable to the primary school, to the shop, to the playing field, the village hall, and as a side benefit, we could work in, as part of the planning agreement, a crossing of Rick Stones Road. So currently, when the children want to go to and from the secondary schools in the edge of Witham, they have to cross Rick Stones Road several times, non-designated crossing points, to get there. And any morning or afternoon of the week, you can see children going up and down there, either on their own with their parents. Looking at site 2249 as a benefit of that site could deal with that. And then finally, Madam Chairman, as the resident said tonight, we don't understand why officers are suggesting that the hamlet known locally as Rickstones End should be within the Witham development boundary. So that's that group of houses just above where the red hatched is for this site. If that is proposed to be within a development boundary, then surely the answer to that is to ask the parish council, would you like a hamlet development boundary around that, like other villages have, where a detached part of the village has its own development boundary, rather than bring it into Witham. So I'll wait to hear what others have to say, but I intend to propose an alternative to the officer recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abbott. Before I go to Councillor Walsh, can I just see if officers want to make any comment on that, particularly perhaps around the Witham versus Rivenhall boundary issue? Alan, you're going to come in on that one?
Yeah, if I just quickly speak on the boundary issue. So the local plan development boundary is the planning boundary for Whittam and obviously Rivenhall has its separate boundaries. They aren't political boundaries, and their purpose is purely to identify areas or within which development would be considered to be appropriate. It would need a development boundary in this area to encompass the new site allocation, although there have been occasions where we have not had a development boundary when we're looking at things like specialist housing to prevent a site from specialist housing going to regular housing. So it would really be a case of a future boundary review as to whether or not that area would need to be included within Whittam. That can take place separately. That will take place separately to the local plan. It's a completely different process to that. I would refer members to the development boundary review methodology, which was agreed last year. So that has been used as a guide to identify a suitable boundary in this location. And I think if members were thinking of having a separate boundary, something like Surrock's Hamlets, and that's something we could potentially consider as an alternative if members wanted to do that. Okay.
Interesting, thank you. Right, Councillor Walsh, you were next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for clarity, I haven't discussed my comments with anyone, including fellow members. I do have a bit of a concern about this because it's outside the development boundary, and I thought part of the purpose of the development boundary was, unless there were very strong reasons otherwise, that we would seek to concentrate possible new proposals within an existing development boundary. And I'd be, you know, it's green field. I'd be slightly worried if we were accepting this allocation, that it could set a precedent and perhaps encourage other forms of urban development. My other point on this site is on the landscape. I mean, I take the points, you know, that the officer have mentioned about, you know, hedges and etc. But could we have some further explanation of what is medium to low landscape? I notice it's only about 250 metres from the Tarecroft wood, which I think is an ancient wood. But so, what is the import of a medium stroke low landscape category? And secondly, while it may not have any local, you know, harmful impacts, what about in a more strategic context in the broader landscape setting? So I do have some concerns and a question on those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the development boundary point quickly, just to say that the purpose of the local plan review is to review the extent of existing development boundaries. We are planning up to 2041. The previous plan goes up to 2033. We obviously need to meet our housing requirement, otherwise we won't be able to get this local plan through the examination, and that does unfortunately mean that we will need to review all the boundaries, and it is perfectly appropriate to redraw development boundaries within the district to accommodate new areas for development in the plan. And just on the landscape capacity point, we were referring to the older landscape capacity evidence base at this time. We are having that refreshed at the moment, so that we would have some more up-to-date information on landscape capacity, hopefully relatively soon. But in terms of the difference, it's about how much development a parcel of land could or couldn't take if it were to be developed. So you get low, medium. There's some various slices as well. So low, medium, medium, high, and high. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the landscape in the district is very nice areas. We have very few areas of high capacity identified, so we wouldn't be able to meet our housing requirements just using those high capacity areas. But I think that's all ready to say on the landscape. Unless Gary's got anything he wishes to add on any of the other points.
Just that this is because it's part of a larger site, so it can be subdivided into smaller parcels as well. So it's given a score of medium to low, but it does include land to the north, which isn't going to be proposed for development. So when sort of subdividing this site, we could consider that this is a higher capacity because it does have the boundary treatments.
Okay. Right. Councillor Bowers-Flint and then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have sympathy with Councillor Abbott. I have great sympathy with the two speakers. And the reason why, and Councillor Abbott will know what I'm going to say, is in Cressin there is now no definition between Cressin Village and Braintree Town. If you drive along the new B1018 that's taken out Claypits Corner, you will see definitely that there is now no definition. And even if I go back as far as when the fast food outlets were built, if you look at any single one of those businesses, they give Braintree as their address and the garden centre. They're all in Cressin, but they say they think it's better to have their address as Braintree. And once a village has lost that identity, it's lost forever. And I would fully support Rivenhall in keeping what little boundary they have now, because if not, they will be a part of Witham as Cressin is part of Braintree, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowles-Flint. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much. Well, I have to say I find myself in agreement with pretty much everything that's been said on this particular application. The first thing that did concern me was the perceived unnecessary movement of the development boundary, as noted by the local resident. And I think as a minimum of that, that could be looked at, that suggestion could be reversed. And I was particularly interested, Alan sort of preempted what would have been one of my questions, is there a precedent for a hamlet? And the Surrock's one seems a very a logical and recognisable example of that, and I think if that could be replicated, I imagine that goes down extremely well, would go down extremely well with the local community. In terms of this substantial site, I think if we're to look at it in the context of Witham, Witham has changed immeasurably over the last 15, 20 years, hasn't it, in terms of huge development, and particularly the development in the north. I appreciate we've had local residents, current local member, former local member here for the south of the town, and whilst there's been frustrations over that over the last 20 years, at least you sense there was a wider plan coming to fruition in terms of eventually the road being built out, all probably far too slow, I'm quite sure, but you are now starting to see the benefits of that development in terms of the improved infrastructure, community infrastructure now coming along, economic services. You see a positive story developing behind that development. With great respect, and I say this as someone coming from Braintree, I look at the north and I don't see the benefits in the north of the town. I really don't. And the encroachment and the impact on Rivenhall, which I think is perhaps one of the most underrated villages probably in the north and centre of the county, the church, and I declare family interest from family connections many decades ago in Rivenhall, long before I was around. But yeah, as I say, I think it's a particularly special place, and it as Councillor Bowers-Flint said, once that community identity is eroded, once it's enveloped by a larger community, it is desperately, desperately sad. So I feel compelled to support any suggestion that takes this site out of that, because I don't see where the benefit's going to come for the town of Witham either. It's an add-on, but Witham's not going to get the benefit in terms of these additional houses. And as I say, as mentioned, the sustainability credentials, it's not particularly accessible to the station. I don't think they weigh up as well as others. However, and I take no pleasure in saying this, but the unpalatable fact about the process we're going through is that this is a numbers game as well. And unfortunately, it is a case of, if not here, where? But I'm very convinced of the idea that it can't be here on this occasion, and I think we should look to oppose it this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I do have great sympathy with the speakers this evening, and I note the very, very strong desire to see Rivenhall, and particularly Rivenhall End, remain part of Rivenhall rather than be absorbed into Witham. My concern is that this is, no doubt about it, a highly sustainable, it's a sustainable location, and the overriding principle in development, as we all know, is sustainability. I also am concerned that obviously on the opposite side of the road there is large developments which I think we originally opposed as a council and was granted on appeal. So my concern is that our desire to maintain that separation here is not going to be looked upon favourably by an inspector, and so I'm afraid my view is that I would actually, as much to my regret, support the officer's view on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Any other comments? No. Right, members. We're going to take a vote on this one separately, given the debate. So, could I have somebody to move a recommendation? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I propose, I don't know if it's the right time to put both together, or we just look at the development boundary, or just this site at the minute?
Just the site.
Just the
just
site.
the site.
Okay, well, I would like to propose that we take 242 out.
I'll second that.
Right, thank you. So that has been moved and seconded by Councillors Abbott and Councillor Bowes-Flint that site 2420 is not allocated. Could I have a show of hands on that, please? 6, 7, 8. I make it right. Thank you. Those against? 2, 3. Abstentions? 1. Thank you. That motion has passed. That site is not allocated for development. Thank you, members. I think we can bring Councillor Wright back in. Oh, Alison, Councillor Ritchie's not getting. I'm aware, Councillor Abbott, that you mentioned 2249. That is actually first on the agenda now to discuss, so we will have a look at that one. Right. Okay, members, so we now go back to the top of the agenda and we'll look at, the first one is 2249, Gary.
Thank you, Chair. Shall I pause after this?
Yes, please, because I think we will need to have a discussion on this one.
This is also called land north of Rickstones Road, but it is adjacent to Rivenhall Village. It's 3.76 hectares and capable of accommodating about 90 dwellings. It's a greenfield, flat, arable land west of the existing dwellings. There's a hedgerow on the western edge. It's outside of the green buffer as well. It's to the east of the green buffer rather than west of the green buffer. It does have moderate, medium landscape sensitivity, but limited coalescence risk. When you are on site, Whittam is not visible. Access is via Rickstones Road, and there's a footpath on the northern boundary, which goes out into the wider countryside, including linking up to Tarracroft Wood. And there are sustainable travel options to access Whittam via footpaths, and the number 38 bus stops at Rivenhall. The site would be contiguous with the village, but encroaches into the countryside and would have a minor negative effect on the public right-of-way. The rest of Rivenhall is less sensitive to change due to the 1950s estates, which can be seen on the map. The scale could be considered to be disproportionate. There is some intervisibility between this site and the Grade 1 listed St Mary and All Saints Church, and there are also some heritage impact issues south of Rickstones Road, so a heritage impact assessment is likely to be required. The recommendation, members, is that the land north of Rickstones Road is not allocated for residential development.
Gary, thank you. Could you just, for clarity, just summarise very briefly the officer's reasons for not allocating? I know they're in the report, but just if you could, if you wouldn't mind just repeating. Thank you. Sorry.
Right. If I can refer to paragraph 3.25, so that identifies there's some intervisibility with listed buildings, and then paragraph 3.26, the change the amenity and character of users of public rights of way and the setting of Rivenhall Way against the allocation of this site. Additionally, there is a higher risk of harm to heritage assets, and for these reasons the site is not recommended for allocation by officers.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Right, members. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, albeit difficult, challenging and egregious in some respects because it's being handed down, as you've said, we do have to meet our housing targets. And I think this site is actually arguably as sustainable as the one we've just said we're not going to have, albeit that I think the number is probably a bit high. I think 90 is a bit high. Now, in terms of the heritage impact, I'm not quite sure how strong that argument is. The church, which is Grade 1 listed in the Scheduled Ancient Monument, is actually off the top of the map. It's some distance away. So I think what you could have is both a landscape buffer on the northern side and a landscape buffer on the western side, which would reduce the numbers down but provide substantial planting mitigation. In terms of sustainability, it's on the bus route, it's on a paved, on a hard surface path. From that site, you've got almost immediate access within a minute or two's walk of the primary school, the main village green, the playing field, the village hall. At the village hall, there's a preschool group. You've got, within a minute's walk, access to the village shop, which gentlemen in there keep very long hours. And it's remarkable how much is in there, considering it's a village shop. And as I said, it's on the bus route. So I think the number 90 is probably a bit high, but I don't think this is as unsustainable as it's being made out. And the other point, which is very much a local information point, but is very important for, which I mentioned earlier, which is very important for Rivenhall, is that Rickstones Road there, the yellow coloured road running along there, is the main route by which children get to and from the cluster of schools in the Conrad Road, Templars area in Witham. And currently they have to cross the road multiple times in order to get there. So what this could, in theory, I know it'd be a development management issue, but what this could in theory do is provide a crossing there and another one further up, which would give much safer access to the schools, where currently children or children and their parents have to mind their backs as they're trying to cross the road. So I just put it out there that I think actually at a lower number this might have some legs, this site.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think what we're seeing this evening is a great example of the benefit of some local knowledge. And whilst every step of the local plan subcommittee meetings, every council member, when their wards have come up for deliberation, have been invited and indeed to come and speak on any of these items, which forms part of the advice. I think this evening what we've got is a clear demonstration of local knowledge which has informed some of the decision making. That's not to say that the good work of the officers has been discounted in any way at all. I think in fact you'll find the majority of their recommendations over the number of weeks that we've sat here have been unanimously agreed with. But I think on this occasion, I think we've got a clear responsibility to listen to what some of the debate has offered and offer something in part which, in fact, aggregatorily, if that's a word, gives something back, as well as the previous decision where we've taken something away, and given some of the evidence based on what some of the proposals could be for this site, albeit it's not up for inclusion yet, could in fact help meet that halfway mark on giving something back this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I think I'd probably be right in saying that the number of homes quoted, and that applies to all of these, really are indicative, I would say, at this stage, so it doesn't have to be fixed at 90, but it gives an indication of what a site could accommodate. Right, any other comments on that one? Right, in that case, members, could I have somebody to move something on 2249, please?
Well, I'll move that we draft allocate it, but
Yes.
on the basis that the numbers are looked to revise down, and that we include landscape buffers on the north and western side.
And Councillor Bowes-Flint, I think, just beat everybody else to it in terms of seconding. All right, members, so it's been moved and seconded that site 2249 is allocated, subject to some landscaping buffers, and I'm sorry, Councillor Abbott, what was the other thing?
The numbers are looked to be
and
revised
and the
down.
numbers, which
Yeah.
I'm sure will be looked at anyway throughout the course of this. So could I have a show of hands that this site is allocated? Thank you. Any against? Anyone against? Thank you. Right, that has been moved and is being allocated and agreed. Thank you, members. Very much indeed. Okay. We move on to 2251. Gary, is that right?
2250.
Sorry, I've skipped one. Yes, 2250.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
2250 Pondfield Farm. It's 8 hectares for employment use. It's an eastern extension of the Eastways employment area. It's proposed for 8 hectares of employment and 8 hectares landscape buffer to maintain some sort of green buffer between Rivenhall End and the employment. The site is flat, arable land with no flooding or ecological constraints. It's medium impact on landscape character. It's however identified within the green buffer in the local plan, and there's one dwelling which would be lost. It's near grade 2 listed buildings at Rivenhall End, but the buffer is expected to mitigate harm against the impact on those dwellings. Access would be via Burgundy Brook, which would be suitable for HGVs. The part of the site is affected by the A12 DCO. We're not sure about if the DCO will be safeguarded or not at this stage, and what impact that will have for potential development. The Employment Land Review does say that this is a suitable site for new employment land. However, there's no immediate need identified for this site. Delivery is likely to be post-2030, and the officer's recommendation is that this site is not allocated for employment development.
Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, I agree with officer recommendation on this, although I would caution against us even looking at it in the future in terms of the size that it's being proposed. So everything within the red hatch south of the railway line and north of the A12 is currently green buffer. So any part of this that was allocated is reducing the green buffer between Rivenhall End and Witham. And the bit where it says Burgie Brook Farm is being built out now, that land has only, as per the discussion earlier with the resident, that land's only recently been transferred to Witham from Rivenhall. So you would really be narrowing the gap right down. But I think the real game changer in all this, of course, is the A12.
Yeah.
Any traffic that was generated by this site would now have to come down the road through the new estate they're building at Burgie Brook, and would have to access the road network via the Eastways junction, and anyone knows what that's like on peak time in the evening. So I think it's the right decision now, but I think it could be the right decision permanently.
Okay, thank you. No other comments on that? I don't sense a disagreement with officer's recommendation, so I think we can move on, Gary, to the next one. Thank you.
The next site is RIV 2251, the Fox Inn, Rivenhall End. It's 0.64 hectares, and which can accommodate about 20 dwellings. It's brownfield land, a former pub, it's car park and some overgrown land to the north. It's closed since 2009. It's outside the development boundary. It has high landscape capacity and it's visually contained by trees and hedges. The proposal is to convert the pub into 6 apartments and 14 new dwellings to the north in 2 phases. Access would be via Oak Road, and they also proposed access via the A12, but I don't think that's possible any longer. And there are good pedestrian links to Rivenhall End and Whittam. However, noise is an issue, and otherwise there are no issues with archaeological concerns or heritage or flooding risk, but its proximity to the A12 likely results in poor living conditions. So the recommendation to members is that Fox Inn is not allocated for residential development.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, just to say, had the A12 scheme gone ahead, I think this would have been doable, and I probably would have supported it. Particularly the refurbishment of the pub for flats, I think that would have been a really good idea. But as things stand, the access would literally be onto the A12 slip road, and the people living there would be subjected to however many tens of thousands of lorries and cars go up and down right next to it. So as things stand, it's the right decision.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abbott. Right, Gary, yes?
RIV 2252, land north of Whittam. This site, we've skipped that one, okay, cool. RIV 2253, land north of Forest Road, circa 60 dwellings, 3.7 hectares. It's within the curtilage of Rivenhall Old Rectory, which is Grade 2 listed. Access is proposed via Forest Road, where there's currently a brick wall. The site contains protected trees, diverse habitats, and it was formerly designated a local wildlife site. Only the southern half of the curtilage is proposed for development, but there will be impact on all the residential development, residential uses inside the curtilage. The site is otherwise well enclosed. The scheme includes housing and some landscape open space to mitigate the heritage impact. But I think there's still a risk of harm to heritage and ecology. A heritage impact assessment will be required. Development would put pressure on any remaining landscape areas in the curtilage and harm amenity. And despite it being in a relatively sustainable location, the ecological and heritage impacts are considered to outweigh the benefits. And the site is not recommended for residential development.
Okay, thank you. Right, yes, we can move on.
RIV 2254, land east of Church Road. It's 0.4 hectares and can accommodate up to 5 dwellings. This site is too small to be allocated.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
RIV 2255, land south of Alpine Grove. It does say Silver End there. It is next to Silver End but it is within Rivenhall Parish. It's 4 hectares. The landowner says that about 100 dwellings can be accommodated. It is a fishing lake, and we think about 50% of the site could be developed, but it would be an unusual layout. Access would be via Western Road, via what is currently a gravel track, which could be enhanced. Or the landowner has proposed access via Alpine Grove. but that would appear to be a problematic idea. Public rights-of-way cross and border the site and links into the countryside. The site contains mature trees, grassland, scrub, riparian habitats, so an ecological survey is likely to be required. Visually, the site is contained, but topographically it's varied. It's an undulating site. It's within an area of medium to low landscape sensitivity. I would say probably lower sensitivity. Development would result in loss of ecological value, amenity and recreational land, and there would be significant harm to public rights-of-way users and the character of the area. So this site is not recommended for our residential development.
Thank you.
RIV 2256, land at Henry Dixon Road. This is south of the A12 at Rivenhall End. It's 7.4 hectares. I think I need to update the number of dwellings that could be accommodated because it says 25 on my sheet, which can't be correct. It's a greenfield site. The majority lies within the A12 DCO limits. And was subject to compulsory purchase. We don't know about the status of safeguarding land for the A12 as of right now, so we probably need to take a cautionary approach. If you were to exclude the areas outside of the DCO, only 1 hectare would remain developable. The remaining land includes a travelling show persons site with commercial storage. There are no heritage or ecological constraints identified on the map, but the site is not contiguous with Rivenhall End. There are limited sustainable travel options, and residents would likely to be car dependent and likely use the substandard junction at Rivenhall End. As such, this site is not recommended for allocation for residential development.
Okay. Oh, yes, Councillor Abbott.
Just very briefly, all the reasons the officer set out, quite right. But obviously, if we did allocate this, we'd have to re-provide the traveller show persons accommodation somewhere else because we are legally required to find Egyptian traveller site and traveller show person. This particular one is a big site. It's been there decades with very long established families who are there.
Okay.
So that would be quite a consideration to have to try and find them land somewhere else.
All right, thank you. That would obviously be problematical. Okay, right, good. Thank you for that. Yes, Gary.
Moving on to site 2257, land north of Oak Road. This is 16.7 hectares with a capacity of 417 dwellings. It's to the east of Oak Road. It's 2 arable fields, and they're both gently sloped down to the River Blackwater, and there's open, long views across both sites to the east. It's adjacent to the flood zones, that's part of the River Blackwater, and the local wildlife site to the east of the river. So buffer zones will be required. Access would be via Church Road or Oak Road, and public rights-of-way could link into Whittam and Rivenhall. There is reasonable access to bus services, but the site has high intervisibility with nearby listed buildings, particularly Who Hall, which is Grade 2 listed, and development would significantly alter the village character and the amenity of public rights-of-way users. It's not particularly contiguous with Rivenhall. Heritage impact assessments will be required to understand the heritage risks, and the site is overall, it's not recommended for allocation for residential development.
Okay, thank you. We dealt with the next one, 2420. You just want to comment on those last two?
Yeah, site 2514, Rivenhall Oaks Golf Course. It's 45 hectares and has a capacity of around 500 dwellings. This is a settlement extension to the northeast of Whittam. It's considered to be a strategic site and will be considered at a later meeting.
Yep.
And KELV 2208 Kings Dean. It's 591 hectares. It just sort of goes, the western part of it is in Rivenhall Parish.
Right, thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. Just on a point of information for the King's Dean site, could we be given, it's a very large number of hectares, could we be given some indication of the range of housing? Because, for example, with the large site in Gosfield, Aylwards Farm, we were given a figure of 3,000 to 5,000. I know we're not considering it tonight, but it's good to have some consistent indication of what the numbers might be.
I understand from the documentation it's around 5,000 dwellings.
Okay. Right. Don't see any other hands up. So, members, the recommendations for these are on page 24, that the inset map for Rivenhall is approved for public consultation. We have already voted on recommendation 1 and recommendation 9. So it's then the remaining recommendations. I need somebody to move. Councillor Abbott?
Happy to move all those, Madam Chairman. Is this the appropriate moment to move also that we do not draw the Witham development boundary round Brickstone's End, but the council seeks the views of the parish council about having its own hamlet development boundary?
Is that, yes, that seems to be meeting. Councillor Parker?
Could I just clarify, the inset map 47, would the proposal then to be to redraw the boundary around Rivenhall to include that site 2249?
Yes.
Or,
Yes, that's
so
that's
with
fine.
that,
Thank
so
you.
the
Yep,
inset
we
map
can-
with that adjustment.
Yes, officers are nodding in agreement, so that's fine. So in that case, Councillor Abbott, are you moving, given those
Yes,
changes?
those two changes
Yes.
to the development boundary
Yep.
issues, yeah.
Yep, okay. Could I have a second? Councillor Bowles-Flint, and a show of hands, please. Thank you. That's agreed. Good. So now move on to agenda item 7, local plan review, Silver End. And I do have a speaker, Councillor Wright, on this one. Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Yeah. Thank you very much for letting me speak tonight.
Okay.
And I'm speaking as the ward member for Silver End and Cressing. Silver End is at breaking point. Councillor Butland will be shocked to hear that I fully support what he said on Monday night, that we need the infrastructure before we get more houses. Silver End is a doctor's surgery with one locum doctor. This surgery also serves Cressing. We as ward members are constantly told we will not get this surgery expanded to meet demand, as it is not as simple as that. It has one school which is oversubscribed. It has 4 sites for housing that are nearly finished or under construction. More traffic with no infrastructure. Site SLV 2272 for 480 houses, which is being discussed tonight, is adjacent to site SIL 389, 350 houses, which is under construction. This site was first refused planning permission, as it was in the wrong place. It was overturned by the planning inspector, and the planning committee have constantly fought against this site. It is now recommended that SILV 2272 is developed with a further 480 houses. Where is the traffic going? It is not going to the A120, as this has been dropped. It is not going to the A12, as this scheme has been abandoned. Vehicles will be stuck in the bottleneck at Gully's Corner, or trying to get under the one-way underpass at the railway line in Rivenhall. Both these are pinch points for traffic. Or it can queue on the Crescent Road and try to get through Witham. At least they'll be able to view the roadworks before the A12, which has been there for 10 years. These houses will also be in a field next to the incinerator, which was built in open countryside as it wasn't suitable to be constructed in the built-up area. I hope you will reject this site as being totally inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Okay, so we move on to reports. Gary, you taking this one again?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, good.
Okay, so for context, Silver End is a second-tier village in the local plan. As a second-tier village, there's a good level of services, including primary schools, primary healthcare facilities, convenience store, post office, news agents, off-licence, pharmacy, and a hot food takeaway. Other community facilities near the Broadway include a library, a sports ground, and memorial gardens. There's some limited local employment, but there are bus stops on the 38 route to reach higher order settlements. The village has a large conservation area with many listed buildings. There are several public rights of way which provide good access to the surrounding countryside. It is understood that the capacity of Silver End Primary School is constrained. The closest railway station is White Notley. It's about 2 kilometres away, but there's no direct connections, and the routes for sustainable travel are not ideal for all weathers. And the main town of Whittam is the nearest settlement. There are a wide range of services there, including employment. However, the route lacks sustainable movement route options, and there's a reliance on motor vehicles. So in terms of the major developments that have come to Silver End since 2015, a total of 613 dwellings have been completed. Land east of Bordhise Road for 50 dwellings, car park at Sheepcoats Lane for 15 dwellings, land west of Bordhise Road for 59 dwellings, and land south of Garden Field Western Road. Land off Western Road for 350 dwellings is still under construction, and land west of Bordhise Road for 94 dwellings is under construction as well. Pre-application discussions have taken place for Crittall's work site. The report says limited progress has been made, although I can update members that the developers have now entered into a PPA, and more details will be shared before the end of the year. Moving on to the site, site 2272, land north of Western Road. It's 20 hectares and can accommodate about 480 dwellings. It, as stated, it's east of Silv 389. It can be delivered over 5 to 10 years at a rate of 30 to 35 dwellings per year. The site is currently in agricultural use. It's divided into 3 open fields with hedges and boundary trees. It's relatively flat and exposed, with a small portion in flood zones 2 and 3, although dwellings can be located in flood zone 1 with floods mitigation without an issue. It's adjacent to a site which was lost on appeal, which was approved on appeal, I should say, really. The inspector found moderate harm to heritage and character, but concluded the housing outweighed the benefits, outweighed the harms identified. It's located in the medium to low landscape capacity area. Public right-of-way 10852 runs along the southern and eastern boundaries, with visual impacts confined to a 500-metre stretch. There's limited intervisibility remaining with any heritage assets, and Bowes Hall is not visible from the site. Vehicle access is proposed from Western Road, requiring hedgerow removal or relocation. Pedestrian access is also possible via Jewett Way and Western Road. The site is served by the 3838 bus route with a regular service. And traffic modelling is outstanding, but severe congestion is not anticipated. The site lies within 400 metres of the indicative A120 Route D, and within 800 metres of Rivenhall IWMF, the waste management facility. It's separated from the WMF by one field. There's no noise or odour observed during the site visit, and there's no contamination, flooding or heritage constraints were identified. To summarise, the site has moderate impacts on public rights of way, the village setting, and there will be some loss of grade 2 best and most versatile land. However, it offers housing in a sustainable location with reasonable access to services, and it is recommended for allocation.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I hope members will bear with me because this is a very important issue for the village of Silver End. It's a very large site. It's only just under the strategic site threshold of 500. So this large site proposed is recommended for 480 houses, and the context is it's additional to 388, which is the old factory site, brownfield site, which we want developed. No planning consent yet, but as the officer said, that could come forward, and that would be built without having to go further into green fields. It's also addition to the adjacent large Red Row site under construction, 350 houses, which is proposed to be retained in the plan, of course, which BDC opposed, but which granted on appeal. It's also addition to the land east of Borstai Road, which is now built out, and the further site recently granted on appeal for 94 houses, which has just started. So there's an awful lot of development going on in Silver End. That's 600 houses added to a Tier 2 village in this review of the local plan before we talk about this site, which is 480. And on top of that, we've had about 200 houses built on other sites. So in total, for a Tier 2 village, over the course of about 2 decades, that's 1,300 houses if we allocate this site tonight. That is completely unsustainable. It's contrary to policy, and it's inconsistent with the approach this committee's taken on other village sites. It is actually significantly more housing than we've allocated so far in some of the Tier 1 villages, including those that have railway stations on the main line. The agenda report says the village has primary schools, plural. It doesn't. It has one primary school. But it does admit that children from this estate would be unlikely to be able to get into the school. Absolutely right, because the current Red Row site, the same was said for that. So we know, if we allocate this tonight, that children from this estate will have to be driven to other primary schools in other villages. It is true there is a bus service, but other than that, there's no sustainable transport links at all. You can't walk or cycle safely to any other village or to the main towns unless you want to use the public rights of way across the countryside, or unless you want to cycle along the main roads, which is extremely difficult and dangerous. If this goes ahead, we know, is a given fact, because we know the A120 and A12 are not in the pipeline, we will see more queuing at Galleys Corner, more queuing at the railway bridge at Rivenhall, and more queuing on the A12 slip roads. Anyone who wants to, apart from some minor employment in the village, anyone who wants to access employment, anyone at all, almost everyone who wants to access employment, everyone who wants to access secondary school needs, and pretty much everyone primary school needs, is going to have to get on a bus or in a car to go and do it. We do have a GP surgery. The NHS has stated it's over capacity. This site is incredibly constrained as to how it can be expanded, and we still don't know when it's going to be expanded. Now, heritage, this is really important for this site. Interestingly, the officers are saying they don't think there's any heritage constraints, and yet the document this council has just commissioned, the review into the conservation area, stated that the large number of greenfield sites around the village has impacted and diluted the Model Garden Village conservation area. And this one is by far the biggest to date. This is bigger than any of the others put together. So I don't understand how the conservation area has been just so disregarded when it's an internationally known conservation area. People come from across Britain and internationally to view Silver End Conservation Area. There's also an omission in the report on heritage. Bowers Hall is mentioned, but if you look at the map on the right-hand side, directly opposite the southern end of this site is Rivenhall Place, which is not mentioned in the officer's report. Rivenhall Place is Grade 2 star listed, and its landscape parkland has been pretty much kept as it is for 2 centuries. The building itself dates from the Domesday, and yet that's not even mentioned in the officer report. On the other side of Rivenhall Place, so just off the southern end of that map, is a large solar farm being built. That was going to be in 3 compartments, but the compartment directly in front of Rivenhall Place was taken out by officers in negotiations with the solar farm developers on the basis that it would harm the heritage setting of Rivenhall Place. And yet here we are saying, no, we can build nearly 500 houses. There would literally be just the width of Western Road between this development and the parkland setting of Rivenhall Place. You can imagine what my views are about removing hundreds more metres of native hedgerow on top of the hundreds more metres we've already lost. The nearest houses on this estate would not be 800 metres from the incinerator. I've measured it very carefully this afternoon. They'd be less than 700 metres from the incinerator. The officer says that no detection of noise or odour during the site visit. Well, that's because it wasn't operational. It will be operational from the 4th of August. But between now and then, between the officer visit and then, there's been a lot of testing going on with smoke and steam, which, as you, Madam Chairman, mentioned, the full council has alarmed local residents. So this will be very close to the incinerator. Now, consistently throughout our considerations of sites, officers have said, and I quote, "In Tier 2 villages, a small scale of development may be considered sustainable subject to specific constraints and opportunities. 480 houses is not small scale on top of all the other sites Silver End has had to take. In fact, I don't think there's any village in the district which has had to take so much development given its scale. On June the 19th, we decided not to allocate roughly 490 houses in Rain, which is Tier 2. Members of this committee were unanimous about that. This is almost the same size. Similarly, Great Yeldon, Tier 2, we decided we were not going to allocate 2 sites, one for 154 on the basis that its scale far exceeds the level of growth for a rural village. Divorce from settlement core represents substantial intrusion into the countryside. Exactly the same argument applies. Another site was rejected at Great Yeldon, Tier 2 village of 159 dwellings on the basis that it, quotes, would contradict spatial hierarchy objectives. Ditto, it's a Tier 2 village. Silver End has more than done its bit for housing in this district. We're talking about well over 600 houses, and it doesn't preclude, of course, there being infill sites in the future. And the site we really want to see developed is the factory site, which remains derelict while all this is going on. So I would urge members, please, to support us in saying enough's enough in Silver End. We need a period of consolidation. We need to get our services back up to speed so we can actually support all the hundreds of residents who are coming in anyway without having to deal with this. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Parker, I think you're just next, and then Councillor Walsh.
Madam Chairman, I must agree with what Councillor Abbott has just said, and I'm afraid I came to this conclusion, well, it's reinforced by what he said, but having looked and considered this site, 613 houses, I think the officer said, have already been built or about to be built in Silver End, and that doesn't include what we hope will be added to that, which is the factory site in the middle. I'm really pleased to hear that progress is being made on that. Be interested to know actually what officers think the capacity of that site would be. But I mean, my 2 main concerns were the traffic impact, and I noticed that we in the officers' report did say when we opposed the Western Road site, the traffic was something that was we put forward as a reason why it should be refused. Obviously, overruled by an inspector. But since then, there have been additional sites that come forward, and I am greatly concerned by the fact that the only way out of Silver End is either via the underneath the railway crossing at Rivenhall End, or over the railway bridge in Witham, or via Galleys Corner. And you know, there must be a limit at which residents are expected to queue to go to work or go to school or whatever. And I think really this is too much. I am greatly concerned about the proximity to the incinerator. I think the whole point of these incinerators is they should be put far away from housing. And I think I hadn't really thought about the heritage impact, but obviously there's a heritage impact as well, let alone the capacity of the services in the village. So I think a site of this size is too much. I appreciate we do need to find places to put this housing, but I'm afraid I don't think it's appropriate here. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And again, these comments are purely my own. I've not discussed them with any other member. If we look at paragraph 3.29 in the landscape capability assessment, it says large parcels on the outskirts of the settlement have limited associations with the urban fabric and contribute to the rural setting of Silver End. Could it not be seen, therefore, to add to the already substantial expansion of Silver End, given recent growth and other recommendations? And also, in the officer's report, I don't think it makes a link. Should it have made a link to policies in the current local plan? LPP1 says that sites outside development boundaries should be confined to uses appropriate to the countryside, and there's another policy there which suggests generally that we should seek to protect the countryside. So I think these are factors that we should also consider. So all in all, I would not support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me. I absolutely have some sympathy for this allocated site, or for this proposed allocated site, in adding to what's already had a number of developments within the village. I think this is a perfect case study, if there ever was to be one, around the cumulative impact of development after development after development, which I know we are very limited as a local planning authority to take into account when we're deciding these individually at planning committee. But if there was ever an area that you could use as a case study for an area that's borne the impacts of the cumulative impact, then it would surely be Silver End. By right of the numbers that Councillor Abbott has shown tonight, if that was a single development, then it would have given Silver End the facilities that it would have deserved: schools, doctor surgeries, transport connectivity, without doubt. So I too have some sympathy with this allocation that's been proposed for us this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Don't see any other comments. I'm going to take this to a vote. Anything that officers want to add? Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. I think the only thing I would ask you to think about is that obviously there is an appeal site next door that will have had an impact on the character, and that's part of the reason why this is being recommended. So I just ask you to think about that in the context of your considerations.
Right, thank you. Okay. Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, I think on the basis that two wrongs don't make a right, and as members have said, Silver End, you only have to visit it for 10 minutes to see how much development is going on, and I've got 100 small houses yet to come. I can't see that we can possibly support this, Madam Chairman, and therefore I move that we do not allocate this site.
Right, does that have a seconder? Councillor Walsh. Right, that has been moved and seconded that the site is not allocated. Could I have a show of hands on that, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, those against? 1, 2, 3. Abstentions? 1, 2, 3. So that is carried, members, that site is not allocated at this stage. Thank you. Right, thank you. Gary, where were we? Recommendation 2? Yes.
Yes, Chair. So Silv 2273, land east of Borsthigh Road, 3 hectares, 59 dwellings. for this one. It's a greenfield site, grassland on it. It's behind Borstie Road, with flat, mature hedgerows surrounding the site to the east and the north. It's in a medium to high landscape capacity area, and the southern part has open countryside views. It's adjacent to the conservation area, but there's limited intervisibility with nearby heritage assets, including the cluster of heritage housing, I think, at the crossroads. Access is proposed from Borstie Road, which would require the demolition of a dwelling with secondary access via Sheepcote Lane. However, this is considered by officers to be unsuitable. Surface water, there's some areas of surface water flood risk, about 20% of the site subject to surface water flood risk due to a brook that runs along the north of the site. So mitigation for this would reduce capacity of the site. A public footpath runs around, and there would be amenity impacts on users of the public footpath and for residents living on Borstie Road. The pattern of development is backland or cul-de-sac development, which is not in keeping with the conservation area character. The site would also require heritage impact assessment to understand its heritage impacts. Overall, this site is not recommended for allocation.
Okay, thank you.
Site 2274, which is Whitehead's Farm. It's 2.8 hectares and has capacity to accommodate 23 dwellings. It's a greenfield site behind Western Lane. It's adjacent to Silver End Primary School, and Silver End Primary School itself is within the conservation area, so it's adjacent to the conservation area. An outline application was submitted, but was then withdrawn. The access is proposed by the unclassified road Western Lane. This is also a narrow lane and is below standard. It's a gravel track towards the southern end of it. It's constrained by parked cars and there's no footpaths. Public right-of-way number 20 is also affected by the development. The site is partially within flood zones 2 and 3. However, 25 dwellings can easily be accommodated in flood zone 1. Development of the site would result in loss of arable land and hedgerows. However, there are limited natural features on site. The officers consider that proximity to the conservation area and access, pedestrian safety and ecological loss are the main issues and lead to a conclusion that this site should not be recommended for residential development.
Okay, thank you.
Sylv 2276, land southeast of Temple Lane. This is 9.5 hectares and can accommodate around 239 dwellings. It's a greenfield site comprising of 3 arable fields and stretches from Temple Lane to Silver End Primary School in an arc. Access is proposed to be from Temple Lane with pedestrian links via Bristol Court, and there's a lane to the side of the school as well that can also be accessed. A brook bisects the site, so there are fluvial and surface water flood risk constraints, which heavily reduces capacity and would result in a layout that is sort of split to the east and west. The site is adjacent to the Silver End Conservation Area and backs onto Valentine's Way. This is one of the few locations where Silver End's conservation area can be appreciated in its countryside setting. So there would be likely to be substantial harm to the heritage setting and the village as a garden community. Otherwise, the parcel is a medium to low landscape capacity area. There are long open views to the south and west, and development would likely result in a isolated cul-de-sac layout south of the brook if you were to avoid the flood zones. As such, this development is not recommended for allocation.
Okay.
And the next site is Sylv 2277, land off Francis Way. It's 2.9 hectares and can accommodate around 80 dwellings. It's a grassland site, and about 20% of it is semi-natural open space, and it's just to the west of a community woodland. You can see that's the green area on the left-hand side map. It's flat, it's not in arable use, but it does contribute to the amenity and local character, particularly the conservation area setting. The western edge of the site is the continuation of the brook, which is in flood zones 2-3. And the main issue with this site is that it currently doesn't have access within the red line boundary. It could possibly be access to a strategic proposal to the west. However, that consideration is deferred to a later meeting. So as currently proposed, this site is not recommended for allocation.
Okay.
And then recommendation 6, members, is that land off Western Road is retained for residential development. Recommendation 7 is Crittle's work site is retained for residential development. For information, this site has a capacity of around 65 dwellings, but I think there are heritage issues on site that could have a downward effect. Site recommendation 8 is Sylv 2386, which is land east of Worsthigh Road, which is, I think it's complete now, members, so this can be taken out as an orange allocation. And then recommendation 9 is land west of Worsthigh Road, which is to be retained. And then recommendation 10 is that sites 2271, 2275, 2278 and 2279 are deferred to a later meeting.
Right, thank you, Gary. Councillor Abbott?
Yes, I hope members there towards the end saw the run of sites which are either just completed very recently or have only just started or are halfway through. So there's a lot of housing to come in the village yet. So I would move all of those, Madam Chairman.
Right, so moved by Councillor Abbott, seconded by Councillor Bowes-Flint. Councillor Parker, did you want to comment?
Yes, I just want to make a comment, please, Madam Chairman. It's just that there are a couple of fairly small sites that Gary mentioned as he went through the presentation, in particular 2274. I think the issue with some of these sites is the access. And if access was easier on some of these sites, then they may have a different recommendation, but that does seem to be making being the ability to sort of allocate these sites very tricky. I do understand that. Thank you.
Yes,
that's
thank
all.
you,
Thank you.
Councillor Parker. Right, so Councillor Abbott and Councillor, are you moving all the recommendations with the exception of number 1, which we've already dealt with, or just as in?
Yes, we dealt with the
Yes, we dealt with
480, so everything else I'm moving.
everything else. You're moving a technique. Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, so that's moved and seconded that the inset map Silver End is approved for public consultation, and then as set out on the recommendations, well, with the exception of 2272, which we've already voted on. Could I have a show of hands on that, please? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Good. Right, we will move on to agenda item 8, which is a sort of roundup of other villages, which, Alan, are you taking this one?
Yeah, yes, I am, Councillor.
Right, thank you.
Thanks very much. This report covers a number of the smaller villages in the district. These sites are they either haven't had any sites submitted through the call for sites. We've not proposed any major amendments or additions to any inset maps or to create any new insets maps. The removal of some development boundaries have been proposed, particularly at Audley End and Tilbury Juxta Clare, to reflect a low level of development and the remote location of those villages. The first village we're looking at, so Audley End, we are proposing to remove the development boundary here. It is a remote village. There are a number of houses there, admittedly, but there are no other designations of note. Belsham Otton. This is the inset map. No major changes are proposed. We have done some small tweaks and adjustments, but that wouldn't result in any sort of additional space being created in the development boundaries, just sort of tidying ups. Belsham St Paul, same with this map. So some small tweaks to the map here. Borley has no development boundary. It was mentioned by one of the parish councils, I believe, so that's why it's on here. There's no proposals or any proposal to identify a development boundary at the village. Fairsted, again, very dispersed village, and no real defined centre to identify a development boundary around. Falkburn, small settlement, it's got very limited features, so we're not proposing to give that one a development boundary. Guestingthorpe, small, yeah, again, we've done some neatening on the boundary, but nothing of significance has changed there. Great Henny doesn't have development boundary, is a small settlement. Does have a couple of, well, one main feature, which is the protected lane, which is the big red line going through the middle of it, but there are no other real features to talk about. Liston, again, very small village, no need for it to have a development boundary. Little Henny, again, another very small village with little really to identify through the local plan. Middleton, yep, so it's a little bit larger in size, however, it's not really in the location we'd want to encourage any further development, so no development boundary. For Turling, there's a little change on Turling. So there's an area of informal recreation which is shown on the map on the screen, which we've been asked to remove by the landowner. It does have a permissive right-of-way through it, but not a fully open public right-of-way. They have indicated that the permissive right-of-way would be retained, but the rest of the land doesn't really serve the purpose of an informal recreation area. The parish council also suggested a small extension to the development boundary to take into account this Nissan hut. However, we don't think it is a suggestion we would want to move forward with. So we're not proposing to expand the boundary down towards that. And this is the proposed inset map. Again, we've done some little tweaks around the development boundary, but no other major changes. Tilbury Juxta Clare, again, small settlement, limited features. You could potentially get some infill in it, but it's not a location that we would intend to encourage development, so we would propose removing this development boundary as well. And I say limited features. And finally, we've got Twinstead. So we've got quite a lot of TPOs at Twinstead, which is quite interesting. But, you know, we wouldn't want to encourage any sort of development here or anything like that. So we've got recommendations 1 to 14 on page 60.
Thank you, Alan. Right, Councillor Parker, yes, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just make yes, I would like to just ask a question, actually. It's really in relation to the inset maps for Belsham Otton and Belsham St Paul, where you state that you have made an amendment to the boundary. So are the inset maps before us with the amendment or without the amendment?
They are, yes.
So in which case, I just don't quite understand why, for example, on that map, it doesn't include the whole of that house. Well, actually, no, it probably does that. That one's probably okay. but actually Belsham St Paul, if I could just have, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, there are some houses further along that road. I just was wanted to know why those haven't been included in the development boundary.
I think it's a case of we have to draw a line somewhere. There was a bit of a gap about here where you could probably squeeze another house in, which I don't think we would want to encourage, really. But yeah, I mean, we could move it down that way a little bit if members were so inclined. But it's a case of we needed to draw it somewhere. I think our GIS lady may have also been a bit concerned about the map size as well, because it's getting quite away towards the edge of it. But that's obviously not a consideration for the development boundary. But yeah, we could do that. But you bear in mind, where you have a development boundary, that's where development can take place, and you could end up with a dwelling in that gap potentially.
Okay.
I mean,
Any
I
other
don't think there's actually, I know this, obviously it's in my ward, I know this very well, don't think it's room there personally, but I mean, I suppose it doesn't really make much difference one way or the other. I just thought it was rather odd that the development boundary wasn't drawn around all the houses in the village.
Yeah, okay.
If you say that you've made some amendments somewhere or other to tidy up, yeah. I'm not sure where those amendments are without having seen the other map, but I'm happy to leave it as it is, and I'm happy to.
I can provide you with one example on the Belsham Autumn map. In this location here, the old development boundary used to run across the middle of the junction. So that's the sort of amendments we are talking about.
Okay, so very
All
tiny.
right.
In which case, I'm happy to move all those recommendations.
Fine. I think actually Councillor Butland has already moved. Would you like to second, Councillor Parker?
I'll have to
Thank
second,
you.
yes.
Right, if no other comments, could we have a show of hands on those, please? Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Now, we have the Schmar next. Would you like a 5-minute break? Members, it's up to you. I'm happy either way. Yes, would. Okay, good. Let's have a 5-minute break then. Okay, members, I think we can. Lovely, good. Start again. So, agenda item 9 is the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, otherwise known as the SHMAR, which Alan is going to present for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, a strategic housing market assessment, or SHMAR for short, is an assessment of unmet need for affordable housing, future affordable housing, and needs of aspiring householders, plus other groups such as people with disabilities, looked after children, students, etc. So the slide up at the moment just shows the process that the SHMAR goes through. So firstly, looking at overall housing need, reviewing the current market, and it then helps to calculate affordable housing and other housing needs. The SHMAR period goes up to 2041, which covers our local plan period. Right. So to summarise the findings of the SHMAR, so slide up at the moment shows the population and household numbers that are going up. There will be a significant increase in certain age groups over the plan period, particularly those over the age of 85 and the 65 to 70 age group. And the next slide shows the differences in population between 2024, which is the SHMAR's base date, and 2041. For the housing market, existing housing market for Braintree, this shows that home ownership has dipped a little bit from a high of around 72%. It does show increases in private rent, and affordable rent it is dropping, primarily caused by right to buy, things like that. Now, in terms of affordability, there are some concerns there. For example, 99% of lone parents under the age of 25 can't afford to buy a house, compared to 5% of couples who are 25 to 34 with no children. So, the total need for affordable housing has been identified at around about 5,000. This represents 27% of the local plan housing target. That was 27% sort of indicates that we should be able to accommodate that with our existing affordable housing policies. That 5,000 figure does include a current need identified of 792 households. Other concerns include people over the age of 75, so that is going up. But we do obviously have a supply of existing older persons' houses. Also households with long-term illnesses, disabilities that are also on the increase. So for specialist housing, so that's sort of with support, care support, things like that, or of a potentially more limited nature, we're looking at about 1,200. And for care homes itself, we would be looking at sort of bedrooms for 396. So these needs should be able to be accommodated through our site allocation process, although it most likely be accommodated on particularly large-scale developments. Or larger-scale developments, sorry. There is a requirement for accessible housing, so what is the part M for 1, 2 and 3? We also need to roughly find 1,000 wheelchair accessible homes as well. But what these figures mean is that our policies on providing a mix of housing types would be supported through our evidence base in the SHMAR, so we are quite happy to carry on doing that. I think I've...
Yes. Yes.
Just ask a question. On the previous slide, Alan, you've got housing with care. Is that housing with care for all ages, or is that housing with care for elderly, please?
Yes, that is not necessarily just elderly people. There are... Apologies. Not just necessarily elderly people, it is people who may have some sort of care element in their housing need. There are some other things that split down as well, such as looked after children. That is a different figure, which is set out a little bit later in the SHMAR. Okay, so I'm just going to, I think I might have another, yeah, persons, and I think we've dealt with this. Apologies. Yes, this is the long-term disability column, so that would be anybody who has a long-term limiting disability, so that's regardless of age. Okay. And this is the figures identified for wheelchair accessible housing, which I mentioned earlier. So if you see the net change at the end there, so between 2024 and 2041, we would be looking for about 650 there. And that is the last slide. Okay, so the SHMA is going to require some updating as we move through the process. We have requested that any future updates are deferred. Delegated to the chair of the local plan subcommittee. This is just to reflect the fact that things like the standard housing method that gets updated twice a year, so that might need tweaking quite a little bit, and also things like updated mid-year population projections, stuff like that. Of course, if anything were to change, which would significantly alter the content of the SHMA, we would most likely take that back to the local plan subcommittee. We would obviously discuss that with the chair beforehand. So the recommendations are on page 72. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. It's a very interesting and in some ways rather sobering report. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One of the reasons that I asked what I asked is because there are more children in care currently than there has been for the last 8 years. And some of these children are having to be moved outside of Essex because the bed spaces are not here in Essex because they're being used up by other authorities who have more money to do that with. And under local government review, it will be more home hitting because of the cost of the children's services will be on those authorities very close to home. So have we taken into consideration the provision of children's homes and that they are for Essex children? Because Sarah will know that I've been leading a thing at county to get this as part of a planning thing where if local authorities approve plans for a children's home, then those beds are on first refusal for Essex children. And because I know that that cost is going to come more locally than what it is now, and members will not be aware of the humongous cost it is now to have children in care, and there are more coming into care. And the increase, unfortunately and very sadly, is children under 1. So I just ask that question if we are making that provision because it will be closer to home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes-Flint. Yes, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we are. So the data that Essex are providing to the districts is there's sort of been a time lag since I met with county and yourself. So we will make sure that data gets captured into the SHMA, and we will give some thought to the planning basis that Basildon have been doing to try and address that issue.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of points really to help with understanding. There's a lot of information in here, and it's great to have that. I think a key figure is 18,955 dwellings over 2024 to 2041. But so that's the total at the end of the period. So what is our baseline? How much more do we have to provide?
Okay, so that 18,000, that is based on the standard methodology figure. Some of that would have already been provided through the existing local plan and its allocations. So when we talk about when we are allocating, it's a lower figure, we will be providing members with an update on that at the end of the next local plan subcommittee.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
until we have that, we can't
Yeah.
say what the net addition is.
No.
No, okay. And then one very specific point, and maybe I've misunderstood. You quoted, Alan, for additional affordable housing, 5,060. But in figure 4, there's a figure there for overall affordable housing need of 6,778. Are those comparing different things, or?
Yeah, the need figure, the 5,060, when you read the conclusion at the end of the SHMAR, it takes into account a lot of different factors, and I suppose its net figure, as it were, at the end is a need for 5,060 affordable houses.
But so what's the 6,778, which is the in figure 2? It's the overall affordable housing need.
I think that is a gross figure.
Of future housing need 2024 to 41.
Give me a second.
Where are you looking, Councillor Walsh?
Figure 2 on page 83.
Oh, yes, I've got it. Okay.
Yes, I found it here.
In the last column.
Yes, I'm just reminding myself very quickly of the contents of that particular table. So that appears to be a assessment of current unmet need for affordable housing. It does have a figure in there for future and aspirational housing as well. Yeah, I think that is a figure that is taking into account people who are also aspiring for home ownership. So
Yes.
yeah, I think that would explain the difference. But the figure of 5,060 is the figure included in the conclusion of the SHMAR as the need figure.
Okay.
I think it's a gross figure rather than.
Right. Anybody else? Any comments? I think it's it's an excellent report. I say it's quite sobering. Amongst other things, the inability of younger people to be able to afford to buy a home, and the really quite urgent need for affordable and social rent properties, which is something quite difficult. Okay. I see no other hands going up. So the recommendations, as Alan said, are on page 72. There are 2 of them. Would somebody like to move? Councillor Bowes-Flint, thank you, and Councillor Walsh seconding. And a show of hands, please. Thank you, members. That's unanimous. Right, that concludes the agenda for tonight's meeting. So I will close at just on 9:31. So thank you very much indeed, members. Good meeting. Very